This might just be the World War I RTS that many of us have been waiting for. Developed by RTS veterans Petroglyph Studios, with a ton of developers on staff who took part in the development of games like the Command & Conquer franchise and Empire at War, they're looking to create a definitive RTS version of World War I here, at least for the Western Front, with their new title, The Great War Western Front. I got a special hands-on early preview opportunity, and what you guys are going to see in this video is an overview of the game, as well as a historical battle, the Battle of the Somme. Before we dive in though, I also want to mention that this game is actually available to play right now as a demo on Steam, so if you already like what you see, just go ahead and open up Steam and get that thing downloading. I got to play about 3 hours of the game, and what I came away with was the impression that they have taken almost every historical element of World War I that you can think of and integrated that into the gameplay, either in the real-time in-game battles or on the overview campaign map. Historical events, as well as battlefield mechanics like different tiers of trenches that offer different levels of protection, are implemented in this game. You're going to have to carefully not only manage your nation's resources, but also their morale back home, your current income as a nation, and your current troop levels. They've even modeled different available units for different stages of the war, which you can play through in campaign mode. Most of my time was spent in the real-time battle mode, so I'm actually going to cover the campaign overview here just briefly because I didn't get a lot of time to dig deep into it. As you would expect in campaign mode, no matter what faction you're playing as, your goal is to break through the stalemate on the Western Front and achieve a victory for your nation. As it was in World War I, the defenders have a definitive advantage in the real-time battles, so on the campaign map, you're going to want to plan far ahead of time for any attack. To do that, you're going to use spies to scout out enemy formations and get details on what battalions you're going to be facing and what other equipment they might have, and you're generally going to want to have a 3-to-1 advantage at least when attacking enemy forces. This also lends to the opportunity of defending against all odds and actually pulling off a really close defensive battle, which I also got to do during my time with the game when the AI charged in on a poorly defended front that I had there on the campaign map. Despite having no artillery of my own, I was able to hold the line by forcing the enemy to funnel their troops bit by bit into my formations, and honestly, the guys I had here in the forests, which provide extra hidden cover for infantry, saved the day, as the German infantry were taking the trenches and their artillery was smashing buildings and all of my defensive trenches non-stop. My guys there in the forest were picking off as many guys as they could during the advance, and finally, I broke the Germans' morale enough that they offered a ceasefire for the battle, and I was able to force them to retreat from that fight. Super satisfying, and it reminded me of some of the clutch defensive battles that I've had before in the Total War franchise. And speaking of Total War, if you've played those games and enjoyed that style of RTS game before with a campaign overview, as well as these larger real-time battles, you're going to be right at home in Great War, the Western Front. Let's dive in deep next with those real-time battles and the different stages that they go through, including a prep phase, a siege phase, and then a timed battle phase, where the attacker has to either push to a victory or offer a ceasefire to end the battle. When you first load into a real-time battle, you're going to be greeted with the pre-deployment planning stage. This allows you to place things like trench networks, which range from basic defensive trenches with firing platforms to full-on concrete bunkers, as well as things like communication trenches, which let your troops move quickly in between the larger trench networks, but are cheaper to build. And you can also pre-place things like machine guns and any of the troops available for the battle if you want them already deployed and in position when the actual battle starts. Everything that you place during the deployment phase, as well as any troops that you call in during the active battle, are going to cost you supply points. The amount of your available supply points is determined by the number of supply depots in the region on the campaign map. You can use up a lot of your supply points during the pre-battle phase, but you have to leave about 25% in your inventory as required by the game so that you have some for using things like your artillery. Every time you fire your artillery pieces, you're going to have to use up a bit of your supply. And you can see when you hover over the fire button how much supply it's going to take for each barrage to be fired. Depending on where you are in the campaign and your own individual unlock tree, you can also pre-place things like mortar nest, barbed wire, heavy and light artillery, and also scouting balloons. The balloons are extremely important. Launching your balloons once the battle starts is going to clear quite a bit of the fog of war, depending on where you place those balloons, and in a lot of cases is going to show you what the enemy has in their trenches and what they might be planning to use for an attack. Launching your balloons does leave them open to attack though, so beware of enemies getting too close and destroying the launcher, or for them to call in air-to-air fighters to take them down. Losing those balloons is going to put you at a big tactical disadvantage. There is also a population limit in-game, so you're going to have to carefully plan out which troops you want to be pre-deployed and which you want in reserve to be called in during the battle if you take losses. All of your troops can either be pre-placed or called in later on, as long as you have both the population and supply to do so. Once you're finished with your pre-deployment phase, you can start the battle and things kick off. You're also going to have to manage both the overall health and the morale of each company. If troops are dying too quickly, their morale will break much faster. Much like similar RTS games, you can retreat those units in the hopes that they will survive the retreat and you'll be able to replenish them back on the campaign map for a later fight. As I said at the start of the video, guys, the depth of this game and how far they've gone to try to represent so much of World War I in-game is just really impressive. And I want to walk you guys through a brief overview of my time with the historical Battle of the Somme so you can get just an idea of how it all comes together. I wasn't able to record this live, so we're going to do a post-battle analysis. I'm just going to walk you through some highlights here. Let's dive in. Now, because the Somme is a historical scenario, there is actually no pre-deployment phase for this fight. The battle is already in progress, and you're going to take over, and in this case, playing as the Germans, try and turn the tide of history and actually win the battle. It is going to be an uphill fight, if you will, because the British have already split your lines in half. If you look at the mini-map right here, you can see that I have lost point B, and my point X up there, which is the main control point for this fight, is completely surrounded now, yet that is the one that we cannot let the British take no matter what. To start things off, we're going to have some suggestions from our officers here in the corner to go ahead and raise our balloons so we can get an idea of what's going on. We've also got 4 troop deployments as an option. I'm going to go ahead and bring those in. And I'm going to begin gassing the trenches here at B in an effort to clear a path to get reinforcements up to point X. Gas is going to be effective early on in this fight, but the more you use gas in a fight, the faster that the enemy can react to it. They're going to be able to deploy gas mass a bit faster, and you're going to lose that element of surprise. So again, gas is useful in the start of this fight, but will become less so as it drags on. Also note that for your artillery here, the light artillery is useful for suppression. Units suppressed by it cannot engage other infantry, but it's really the heavy artillery that does actual damage. Now, I also remembered, thankfully, to get all of my troops ungarrisoned out of the concrete bunkers here. Concrete bunkers do completely protect your troops from incoming artillery fire, but your troops inside don't have good angles to engage advancing enemy troops, so you're not going to want to keep them in those bunkers if your objectives are getting pushed, which X is definitely getting pushed right now. I'm making some aggressive moves here on B, but I'm getting machine gun fire from 2 different directions. I did not expect that machine gun to reach so far across no man's land there on the right side, and I did not have my artillery firing fast enough to suppress the machine guns on the left, which are cutting my troops up pretty badly. Also, those staggered trenches up there of the elevation are just absolutely nasty to advance against. The British are firing downhill on top of those machine gun nests, helping out. Still managed to get some troops into the trenches, and it looks like my defensive lines here at X, point X, are going to hold for the time being. Once I've gained just the slightest foothold in the corner of the trench there at point B, I'm going to press my advantage as the British try and reinforce. Gas is less effective now, but it's great for suppression still, as I'm trying to bring more troops up and just stretch that foothold out in those initial lower trenches here at B point. The British aren't going to let that stand though. Besides reinforcing from the middle of B point, they've actually done a pretty smart move here, and they've brought troops across no man's land from A and reinforced from the other direction. So I come very, very close here to losing all of the trenches that I had captured here at B. Thankfully, I've brought grenadiers, which are a bit useful at close quarters combat and trench clearing, compared to just your basic standard infantry. I'm also trying not to forget about Y point down here on the lower right, the kind of southeast corner of the map. Capturing Y is not my main objective, but it is a reinforcement point, and you're going to notice a couple of times that the British team is going to make some probing attacks here against my lines, and if they were to push through those lines from Y, they can actually capture my command point there in the corner, and I would lose the battle. So technically, to avoid losing, I need to hold both my command point and point X. So it's kind of two fail conditions for this fight. And this is where some scripted rolling artillery comes in. That is scripted for this particular battle, the larger kind of map-wide rolling artillery, but you can use your light artillery to do rolling barrages of your own to cover small advances. Or if you have lots of light cannons, you can actually layer that rolling barrage quite nicely, just not quite as effectively as these scripted ones that you're seeing here. Impressive looking, but I don't even know if they can actually do damage. It might just be for looks. It's hard to tell. Either way, I tried to avoid marching right into it. And of course, right when I was just getting a good foothold again in that corner of B point, the British call in a air attack, bring in a bunch of fighters, and start taking down my observation balloons there. And actually making a push with their infantry down into my command point. That's putting me at risk of losing the mission, but it's also taking troops away from the defense of B point, so I'm going to try and press my advantage there while they're pressing on the outskirts of my command point. And there we go. Once I get my grenadiers inside of the concrete bunker there at B, that is a really stable foothold, and I can keep bringing in fresh troops to reinforce it now. This entire time, the British are constantly attacking X point, but my defensive line there with the machine gun nests and the elevation and those multiple sets of trenches are holding just fine on their own. I'm just very glad that I started with some infantry up there at X point. Otherwise, I think I would have already lost this fight. This back and forth over B point goes on for quite a while. I lose a few observation balloons up there at X point, but X is really starting to feel pretty secure. As the timer counts down, I've actually lost my foothold there in the corner of B. The British reinforced from point A again, but because I have made it and run the timer out, I'm going to get a free underground mine scripted as part of the story for this scenario. And they're going to blow a huge hole in the defenses there at B point. Look at that explosion. That is horrifying. Seeing I've lost the entire attack at B now, but their defenses are down, I'm going to go ahead and call in reinforcements from X point. Something that I had not realized that I could do. If I had looked carefully at the mini-map there, that little up, down, left, right arrow, that tells me that there is a reinforcement point right there where I can bring troops in. So it turns out I did not have to depend on those starting troops at point X. I could have had more backup up there the whole time. Calling in troops to exploit that massive hole in the lines at B seemed like a good idea, but the British countered almost immediately with a harassment air barrage here. They've got some of these attack planes just circling, and I was expecting a bombing run and then they would be gone, but these guys circled and just decimated my attack with the machine guns on the back of all things. I don't know if they're supposed to be that effective, but it seems like damage-wise, it's the equivalent of having a machine gun nest there on the ground just mounted to a plane. The accuracy is almost hilarious. That single plane wiped out, I guess that would be 5 battalions of troops in about 15 seconds. So I had to bring in all new reinforcements, which is going to hit my supply levels. Again, not sure if the planes are supposed to be that powerful or if I just got super unlucky there. You can also see I'm using that rolling barrage from my light artillery to help cover the advance this time, even though I believe there's no ground troops in the immediate area. From there, it is a hand-to-hand fight over the trenches at B, but it's really just a matter of time. I quite quickly get troops inside the capture point and capture that flag, even though there's still a good number of British troops in the trenches around it. That gets me some additional reinforcements, some additional supplies, and the option to call in aircraft of my own at long last. So I call in some fighters to help take out the enemy scouting balloons and to engage the enemy bombers and attack planes that are still circling. And I'm also going to have to defend point B as well as X as my objective now. Losing point B is now going to be a fail condition. Their bombers keep harassing my lines, and I was looking at possibly attacking up from my command point and hitting the edge of point A there. I have a bonus objective of capturing point A, but their machine gun nests are in hardened bunkers there on the corners of point A, and I never really gained enough of a power foothold to make a strong push with artillery and infantry en masse against point A. I tried a couple of probing strikes, but each time I would send troops in, I just didn't have enough to commit to pull it off, and then the British would counterattack very quickly from point Y, and I would see that my command point was at risk again. So beyond those probing attacks on A, I really never got close to actually capturing it. As the timer continued to tick down, I was almost out of time for this preview session, so I was really trying to hold the line as best as possible and wear the British down to hopefully counterattack a stronger attack on A, but again, it just never panned out. With about 7.5 minutes left on the clock for my final win condition there, just holding points X and B, the British get some tank reinforcements, and in this case, I saw them very, very early, just as they were heading in from the edge of the map. They're being called in as active reinforcements, and I nailed them with my heavy RE, which thankfully was cooled down and ready to fire. I got both of those tanks almost immediately. From there, it really just was a matter of time. The British got a couple more waves of scripted heavy tanks, supported by infantry, and some of them did actually burst through my lines here at point B, to my surprise. From what I could tell, my basic infantry couldn't do much against those tanks, but my grenadiers were able to use, I guess, just their anti-tank grenades against those tanks quite effectively, even though they did take some casualties while doing so. Beyond my grenadiers and heavy artillery, I'm not sure how I would have dealt with these tanks if they had all made it to my front lines, though, so I was really trying to hit them as they were crossing no man's land. With just a couple of minutes left on the clock, I really felt like my lines were finally going to hold, and again, I was just about out of time for the capture session, so I had to call it there as the battle was winding down. And sure enough, my lines actually held, as the recording kept counting kind of by itself there after I left control of the scenario. And sure enough, I pulled it off. Despite some enemy tanks making it through my lines and roving around point B, tanks can't capture objectives. My infantry held the day, and I actually defied history and won the Battle of the Somme as the Germans. And there you guys have it. That is the Great War Western Front. Just one of the historical battles there, and a little bit of an overview of the game. Hope that gave you guys an idea of what you can expect out of it. Again, the game has a free demo on Steam starting from today, so make sure you guys check it out if you're interested. I had a lot of fun on my preview session, but I want to go ahead and try it on my own PC. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.